Welcome back to my totally very quality production of a guide. Today's topic, tempo. So for those of you who don't know, it's pacing, flow of the game and efficiency of making plays, and reaction to different options. For example, when little Timmy pushes a wave and decides to help the Drake, it's tempo. If he recalls, it's also tempo. If he leaves the game to get a sandwich from his mom, well, it's also a tempo, kinda. And depending how fast he ran for that sandwich, he may have even utilized it pretty well. You can look at it in a form of turns. Remember all the times you died because you fought in the enemy wave? Yes, that's because it was their turn, and you decided to force something, which is not always the best idea. Okay, now just so you get a better perspective, I'll break it down to 4 components. First one is your resources. So basically HP and mana. If you don't have HP, you will clearly not go fighting the enemies, right? Never mind, who am I kidding, of course you will. I would do the same. Well, at least make sure to have mana. The next important thing is champion power spikes. This one requires you to know more or less what each champion does, but if you are watching something this advanced, you are either really into the game and know this stuff already or you are a nerd. In which case remember you can join my Discord, linky in the description. Anyways, third thing is wave management. I will talk about it briefly, but here's where the concept of turns comes in handy. If you push the minions in, it's your turn to do something. If enemies do it, it's their turn. If the wave is in the middle, whoever does something first gets the tempo. That's literally all. But if you want to learn about wave management more in depth, check out my minion guide. Anyways, the last component is map control. This one is more about vision control and position, because if you see an entire enemy team stacking in one bush, and you have Malphite on your team, oh trust me, you will definitely get that tempo. But for example, if you don't have any wards, it might stop you from moving to the objective, or make you go the long way around, forcing you to be less efficient. So the next time you think enemy jungler is nearby, maybe instead of face checking the bush, you will drop your tempo and don't int. And now that you know what tempo is, and how it works, I'll talk about it in all stages of the game, so let's start off with the early game. The most important thing here is previously mentioned wave management. Seriously, go check my video about it. But the summary is, if you push the wave you can do things, and if you are strong enough, you can even have more tempo over enemies when freezing. But you have to make sure they literally cannot walk up to you. And if enemy pushed in towards you, well, you basically prefer to stay under the tower and farm like a good little ADC. Of course you have your own free will, and nobody is stopping you from joining a random Drake fight, but just so you know, it's only good if you are sure you will make a huge difference in a fight. Otherwise just don't fuck yourself over with it, and just get the gold and XP. Another thing are fights. Since it's a 2v2 lane, you have way more flexibility to go about it, but sadly most people ignore it. You can actually fight for tempo. Yes, I mean it. Literally just fist fight just so you can move faster. Well, it's not exactly about moving faster, but as I mentioned before, HP and mana are resources that have huge impact, so if you decide to lose half your mana and some HP, to make the enemy pretty much disabled, it's gonna be worth it. And if they are stupid enough to move after all, they will just die. And the last thing you have to know about early game tempo is about recalls and gold. Well, it applies to all phases of the game, but I'm mentioning it here, because fucking it up in the early game is the easiest to explain, and to learn, just because it's the most visible. Anyways, just to help you visualize it, try remembering every time you got a lead over the enemy by killing them, and then a minute or two later you were back to even, or you even somehow fell behind. Now guess why it happened. Overstaying. Yes, overstaying can have an immense impact on your lead, because most people do it without thinking. The only time it's good to do is when you need just a little bit more gold to finish a big item. Any other time, it will end up in one of 3 ways. First one, enemy is stupid enough and will do absolutely nothing, not punishing your greedy ass. 2, they will realize that they have free lane and will push it so fast that by the time you come back from your late recall, you will start losing gold and XP. And 3, the worst possible option, they will literally stop your recall, and you will either die, or you will be stuck on the lane with no HP, getting bullied, unable to farm. And it's all because you grieved for that fucking plate. Or minions. So remember, unless you really fucking need that gold, you better just start recalling earlier than you think. Now on to the mid game. And as we all know, mid-game is called this way, because you swap with mid. I totally didn't make this up. You go there, so you can be all around the map a lot more quickly with your support. It also gives you a lot more options than if you were only on the side lane. Apart from moving to fights, you can choose the objective you want to prioritize, and you can also ignore your team and play for yourself, and just take towers instead. Of course, more often than not your team will flame you for doing so, but if you think the fight is lost anyways, even if you move there, don't fucking bother with them, there is no reason. Just trade random fight for tons of gold for yourself and carry their asses. And apart from gold, there is actually a strategic reason behind taking towers, especially the mid lane one. So every team has their part of the map, where they can feel safe in. Now look what happens when they lose a tower. The map opens up for you, and enemies have a lot harder time moving around, because there are a lot less places where they can feel safe. They lose a lot of vision, and it allows you to catch them. When it comes to the late game, you can actually use your tempo a lot more differently, though the first point is similar to the mid-game one. Objectives. Objectives in late game are extremely important, because they are the main thing that can change the outcome of the game. You want to make sure you are there for objectives in 99% of the cases, because you being there will make the fucking difference. So you have to be aware of the timers, and where you are on the map. And in the 1% of the cases, you actually do want to stay cross-mapping. It takes a lot of practice, but if you know when to do it, you might solo win the game. The idea behind it is, you pressure enemy base, tier 3 tower, inhibs, nexus towers, while enemy is fighting for the objective. If you were already deep into the push just before the fight, enemy will have to choose. Fight at an advantage for the objective and lose their base, or send 1 or 2 people to defend, and possibly give up the objective. And I understand it's mostly technique used by top laners, but you can do it too, just have to be a lot more careful. Apart from that, there is also one little trick that almost no one uses, that allows you to get more tempo over the enemies, or at least allows you to match it a lot more easily. And since I already talked about it in my minion guide, I surely don't have to talk about it again, because you definitely watched it, right? Well, I guess I should still mention it. Stalling the wave. So in late game, pretty much everyone pushes the wave the moment they see it, but you actually don't have to do it. If you just stop the wave in a safe spot and slow push it, not only will you be, well, safe, but also you have the prio over the wave. Enemies most likely won't be able to walk up close enough to push it, because they could die, and the moment the next wave comes, you will basically have a stacked wave just before the objective. That enemy will have to deal with. There is just no recovering from that. But fortunately you can recover if you fucked up your tempo, and you have to know only few very simple things. First one is about recalling very often. This one applies only to a losing landing phase. In some games you will have a very hard time getting ahead, just because their champions are way stronger. Shit happens. But to avoid getting bullied, you can actually recall every opportunity you get, just so you can match them with your resources, or even get ahead of them. It's mostly used in very aggressive lanes, where even a single longsword can make the difference during fights, but it also resets your HP and mana, giving you additional head start in fights. But if you think the lane is pretty much lost, or there is no way to even attempt fighting them, your second best option is spontaneous roam. If you can't farm even when you are on the lane, and just pointlessly lose HP, it's better to use your presence as a pressure on other lanes. Preferably mid lane, since failing the roam there isn't as punishing. And remember, you don't have to kill to make the roam worth it. Sometimes forcing sums can be enough to put your team ahead. And when it comes to mid and late game, the most consistent option is to constantly push and move. Your job in this situation is to shove the wave as fast as you can, and instantly start moving around the map. This will create pressure, and force enemies to respond. And you don't even have to do anything. Sometimes just you not being visible on the map might make enemies question their life choices, and they will end up doing some of the more questionable things, thinking they are making a good play. Your other option is a bit more questionable. It's very much related to what you can do when you do have the tempo, just in a way more coin flip manner. And remember when I mentioned mid-game tempo? That you have to play deliberately, and play for the strengths without overextending? Yeah, this is where you throw all you know out of the window, because that's where the main difference comes. If you are behind, your best bet is to play for opportunities, and you have to take calculated risks instead, because in games where your team goes 0-20, coin flip can be the best option. What I'm talking about it is trading objectives and committing to plays. If you are so behind you have no chance of winning, going for risky plays, like coin flip Baron or Tower, might be the only way to win, and you should definitely consider them as options. Just remember that it might win you the game as much as lose it. But as I said, it's very much a Hail Mary coin flip. Well, that's pretty much all you need to know. If you still got any questions, feel free to comment. You can also join my Discord and bully me with questions there. Linky in the description. Thanks, bye.